Hey everyone! Great to be back with you all again. It's been almost 2 years since I published my video on the original Crisis Core for the PSP, and I will never forget the shock that I felt at seeing that viewer count go up so high, no doubt thanks to the help of the Night Sky Prince himself, who was kind enough to share it. Ever since the announcement of this remaster, I went back and forth in my head about whether or not I'd do another one. After playing and replaying the game enough times to get the Platinum Trophy, I decided, hey, why not, right? There's plenty to talk about, and what kind of a JDOmnislash would I be to just stand by and not give my thoughts on it, right? So let's jump in. With the dust settled and the hype train now coming down to its final stops, let's talk about how Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion turned out. It feels like it was so long ago now, but for over a decade, Final Fantasy fans had hoped that their favorite PSP game would soon find a way to get into their hands. Being locked behind one handheld with no digital options available, gamers without a PSP were simply stuck. It didn't help when rumors circulated about the game's lack of a re-release, having to do with Gackt's likeness being used for the character of Genesis. Crisis Core was reaching the point of becoming a mere memory for some, forced to lie dormant within the hearts of those who were fortunate enough to track down a copy, or play it back when it came out in 2007. But following the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake, a bit of hope was restored when certain references to Crisis Core began to resurface. It was only a matter of time. And look at us now! Not only has the game finally received the coveted remaster treatment, but it's now available on almost every modern platform you can think of, from the PS4 and 5 to the Xbox One, Series X or S, the PC, and even the Nintendo Switch. Quite the turnaround, eh?
Oh, Aunt Jill! I love you, man! Aunt Jill!
Don't make me regret this, Zach.
Sir.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take it from the very top. What is Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII? Why, it's a prequel to the original Final Fantasy VII, following the journey of Zack Fair and his adventures while climbing up the ranks of Soldier, and helping to set the course that would lead us to the events of Final Fantasy VII itself. But while the look and feel of the game still felt very much like Final Fantasy VII, the gameplay itself was quite different, implementing an action RPG format that was also being used in games like Kingdom Hearts at the time, and of course would later evolve into the style of Final Fantasy games we play now. As many of you are aware, I already made a video touching on the original game, including the story, gameplay, and replayability. Instead of repeating a bunch of the same talking points, I'm going to treat this video as more of an expansion to the original, touching on everything that's changed since then, and whether or not the game will be worthy of picking up for those who are either curious about trying it for the first time, or those considering a revisit after all these years. First, we'll start with the presentation. The game is now built in Unreal Engine 4, just like Final Fantasy VII Remake. This also allows for some quality of life enhancements, such as being able to move the game's camera in all directions, both inside and outside of combat. And hey, Zack can finally sprint! But the changes go much farther than that. First, I'll talk quickly about how the game's combat works, followed by the changes made, and just how impactful they really are. When going into battles, Zack fights in a confined space that he can run in any direction with. He can choose to do combination attacks, cast magic with equipped materia, use abilities, and use items. During all of this, a little slot machine called the Digital Mind Wave, or DMW, begins to spin. While selecting different faces, it will also display special cutscenes for each character, relating to Zack's memories with them. Getting 3 of any of these faces will allow Zack to use a summon spell, or a limit break ability, straight from that character's own set of attacks. Numbers also roll along this slot machine. Getting 3 in a row will activate a different effect, whether it's your magic or ability meter being unlimited for a short time, increasing your HP, or even leveling Zack up. It's a system that appears to be random at first, but actually isn't. You still level up your skills, materia, and character level at a moderate pace while defeating enemies, and the rest of the limit breaks and cutscenes for them do all eventually occur over time, even if not everyone experiences these things in the same time or place. To me, this system was not without its flaws. While I didn't have a problem with its existence or using it throughout the game, I still found it unnecessarily confusing to work with. It would cause you to have far less control over what attacks you would and wouldn't see, and cause certain fights to draw out for long periods of time when they shouldn't have taken more than a minute. And the biggest sin of all? Every time a memory cutscene would start to play, it would interrupt the fight and force you to watch it, with no option to skip it. Even if you had already viewed the same one 100 times over, you would still be forced to sit back and watch it again while waiting for the battle to continue. And did I mention that this would include the times that the limit break failed to even go through? I'm happy to say that the team heard our woes and managed to change up this system for the better. On top of the fights no longer stopping for every single 2 out of 3 roll, you finally have the ability to skip all limit and summon cutscenes aside from a few very specific ones. This one simple change makes the entire game much more forgiving with your time. Thanks to this, I was able to blast through the mission mode, unlock the costly punch materia with a plus 990 HP bonus, and take out Minerva in no time. On that note, the mission mode is still exactly the same as it was before. Going to a save point would allow you to find and select any missions you had unlocked. While they have different main objectives and story points behind them, the majority would revolve around you doing the exact same thing. Walk through a small labyrinth or open area, fight enemies, and defeat some type of main or boss enemy at the end. Done in a row, these can start to feel extremely tedious very fast. But once again, thanks to the new combat enhancements, this was far less taxing on the second go-around. One more small aside is that losing in a battle will now give you a screen with the option to retry the battle, or even open up your menu to edit your equipment and fight again. The original would make you go back to your last save no matter what. Once again, this is a more than welcome change. There were a ton of other small changes made to the combat, but the last one I'm going to focus on for now is prominent during the game's major boss fights. Instead of a boss simply being able to cast their own special attack or limit break, you're now shown a skill meter on the boss while they're charging it up. During this time, you have the ability to attack the enemy and lower the amount of damage the attack will cause. It's even possible to stop the attack altogether if you're strong and quick enough. Between this and the fully movable camera during fights, I can't think of a single change or enhancement that I didn't find beneficial. A+ work here. Now let's go back to the visuals for a bit. While the look of the game is now far more suited to match with the likes of Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's obvious that it doesn't look nearly as detailed as Remake does. That's fine. We're once again talking about a remaster of a PSP game here, not a whole new remake project from the ground up. While some environments do end up looking inevitably average, there are quite a few that look shockingly good at the same time. Benora Underground, for example, looks amazing, and actually would have worked just as well in a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake. The character models all closely resemble their remake counterparts as well, making them look far more detailed and well-proportioned. Compared to the original Crisis Core, all of these enhancements are night and day difference and do a great job in bringing this title over to modern audiences. One thing I find interesting, as in not particularly good or bad, just interesting, is that the FMV cutscenes in this remaster are the exact same ones from the PSP original, just with a slight upscale to match modern displays. This surprised me quite a bit to see, especially since the character models in them don't even match with the models in the game anymore. Still, this never took me out of the experience at any point. And hey, you finally get to watch this iconic scene in HD. And doesn't that just make it all worthwhile? Also, yes, I'm aware that the original Final Fantasy VII had a vast difference in graphics when inside and outside of battle, and that this change is fairly small by comparison. In my original Crisis Core video, I gave all of my thoughts on the game's story. I found it to be entertaining and an all-around good time, despite some elements of it not quite holding up for me, and some annoyance at the way Genesis' character was written in, to the point of forcing unnecessary changes to the lore of the original Final Fantasy VII. And my thoughts on it are exactly the same here, as, to the surprise of some, no elements of the game's story were actually changed, altered, or added on. After the changes made in Final Fantasy VII Remake, you wouldn't be blamed for assuming some elements of Crisis Core's story would be changed or altered, but no. Everything is exactly as it was, whether you see that as a good thing or not. What did change, however, is the voice work. On top of getting new voice actors for the English version, some of which were made to match those same characters in Final Fantasy VII Remake, all of the dialogue in Crisis Core Reunion is fully voice acted, whereas the original would only use voices during the most important of scenes. This means that former non-speaking characters like Kunsel finally get their time to shine.
This mass soldier desertion is why your training's on hold.
As for the voice acting quality itself, that will of course come down to preference. While I didn't find any of the new voices to be bad in any way, I did find myself wishing to hear Rick Gomez and George Newbern reprise their roles as Zack and Sephiroth again, respectively. With that said, I still think Brianna White is the perfect Aerith, and you will not change my mind on that.
No, I'm Aerith. You fell from the sky.
Even if you don't like the new voice actors, however, you do now have the option to flip the audio to Japanese and go with that instead. More options are always better. Are there some negatives to all of this? A few, though nothing too glaring. I'll mention them briefly here. Once again, because this is a remaster of a portable game, a lot of the segments added into it, like the various mini-games thrown at you or the stealth mission in Chapter 5, might feel a little strange this time around if you didn't already find them frustrating before. There is also no chapter select. While this is forgivable, I admit I was hoping to see it return after the brilliant way it was handled in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Those looking to 100% the game and get all of the trophies and achievements like I did will need to remember to save often. I'm happy to say that everything here really hits the way it's supposed to. The game's most emotional scenes, including death and betrayals, and the iconic ending, are all still just as powerful as they were back then, and I'm thrilled that more people are finally able to experience it now. Those with fond memories of it should still find these moments to pack just as much of a punch as they did at the time. But what about someone who, understandably, never played the PSP original, and is just curious as to how it holds up now? I still believe those people can have just as much fun with this remaster, but on a few conditions. 1. The understanding that this is not Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2. It's simply Crisis Core for the PSP, now enhanced for modern platforms. And 2. That the DMW is not as random as it looks, and that the sooner you understand how to work with it, the more smoothly your battles will go.
Oh yeah!
It's hard to find major fault in anything else here. As far as remasters go, this one managed to improve on the original Crisis Core in just about every single aspect I could think of, and then some. No longer do I have to sit back and wait for the slot wheels to turn. Controls are now smoother and more user-friendly than ever, and the graphical enhancements are commendable. If you're thinking of revisiting this title, or considering giving it a go for the first time to get the rest of the story, there is no better way or time to do so than with Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. It's hard not to come out of this without being thoroughly impressed. From a presentation and gameplay perspective, this is a remaster done right. It's clear that a large amount of work was put into making the game look and feel more modern, while still holding on to everything that made the original so beloved in the first place. Voice acting issues aside, it's hard to find fault with just about anything that the people at Square did to make this experience a better one. Whether you're revisiting this game, or hopping into it for the first time, longtime fan of the original Final Fantasy VII or not, this is a must-play for fans of the series, and even more so for the fans eagerly awaiting the next entry in the series of remakes. And that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have you played this game before yourself? What did you think of it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're feeling generous, please consider donating to my Patreon, where awesome people like Brandon, Erica, CLO, and Jedi Dude all help to keep this channel going. I'll see you all next time, and remember, embrace your dreams. And whatever happens, protect your honor. As soldier! Good night.